Does Iran pose any threat to the United States? Is anybody trying to make that argument even? Like, they're not even trying to make that argument,
Yeah,
right?
occasionally here, but it just doesn't work. Iran is no threat to the United States. It just is not.
It's
Right.
But people have to
It's
see this in
right.
America, right? They have to understand, like, why is this happening? Like, there's people on the bases, like our military, the people on the aircraft carrier. They have to be asking, like, wait, why are we on the other side of the world? Here, like this country poses no threat to my homeland. Why are we here?
I sure some do, but probably a lot of them believe it. There's just been a lot of anti-Iranian propaganda over the years and decades, and it's been effective to a great extent. A lot of people think that Iran's a very, very scary, it's kind of it's part of the axis of evil, as George W. Bush put it, back then. It's, they that propaganda works, and I think that they don't really understand, people who don't follow geopolitics very closely. They just assume we're going to attack Iran. It must be necessary. We know they're very bad. They must must be up to something. We've got to stop them.
Well, you're saying that it's clear that Netanyahu's goal is regime change. He wants to dismember Iran, is what you said, throw it into chaos. Okay, I understand. But just when I take a step back, doesn't anybody in Israel just think about it long term? Like, what does that mean? Like, do that you're going to, when you destroy countries, attack and kill people, that it creates resentment? Do they not have that understanding that if you ever hope to integrate into the region in some way to be able to live for the long term as a country, to survive peacefully, you can't constantly be killing people and stealing land and overthrowing governments and installing terrorist head choppers as heads of state. This, even if they succeed, I'm just saying that
Yeah,
that
right.
is a death sentence for Israel. You have, okay, now everybody knows who the enemy is. So, like, why doesn't that rationality enter into the mindset of these people behind this operation for your own self-preservation? Like, if you're pro-Israeli, if you care about the Israelis and you want them
Yeah.
to survive and live in peace in the region, then why are you adopting this asinine, suicidal foreign policy, which says that no country in the region can have any power whatsoever, have any sovereignty? It has to be dictated by us. And the way we do it isn't by giving the carrot. It's only the stick. We will bomb you. We will overthrow you. We'll destroy your currency. You will assassinate your presidents, whatever it is. We'll blow up children with pagers, anything, it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I don't think there really is any questioning of this strategy. Maybe just at the edges, at the tactical level, but not the strategy. Again, I follow the opinion pieces and analyses and Haaretz, and when it comes to like IDF actions and IDF and Israeli policy vis-a-vis neighboring states, the leftists, unfortunately, I'm sure there are individual exceptions, but just by and large, the leftists are pretty much on the same page with the rest of the country. I think, unfortunately, that's the way it is. Maybe they also, looking at it, yeah, I don't like to say this, but maybe they feel like, well, hey, our strategy has at least succeeded with our neighbors. We've subjugated Jordan and Egypt. They're completely dependent on us, again, with help from the United States. And, they are become vassal states to us. The ones that tried to resist are now, in chaos, and it works. And because they're in chaos, they can no longer resist. And now we'll just extend that same policy to Iran. But one thing I would say is that I read a very interesting analysis, by it was by a Middle Easterner. No, I think it was maybe Middle East Eye, but just on the fact is that Israel's behavior, which is as you just described it, is ringing alarm bells in places like Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf states. and Turkey, these are countries that actually have really bent over backwards to get along with Israel, even though rhetorically they sometimes pretend to be, very committed to the Palestinian people, et cetera. We know they do all these things under the table, but they are becoming increasingly alarmed. They didn't really fear Israel before. They felt like, oh, that's just a problem for Palestinians or, maybe for just the neighboring states. But, we're over here. We can make money off of our relationship with them. But as they see them expand, and become increasingly aggressive, they are becoming increasingly alarmed. And that's one of the reasons why they have, I think, pushed strongly against this war, and they have, buried the hatchet with Iran, and so there's a potential, like maybe this war will happen and it will succeed. I don't think it will. I think it highly unlikely, but it just could. Is that there's a combination of militias coming in from neighboring countries. We talked about there different ethnic minorities that do have these secessionist movements and have a militias poised on the other side of different borders. And then there's a massive, air attack. Maybe Iran will fall. I don't want that to happen. I don't think it will. But let's just for argument's sake that happens. One consequence of that might be that, again, like Saudi Arabia at this point just realized, oh my God, we're probably next. And maybe they seem to be starting to realize that now, where it's just like, okay, we can't just have business as usual with the Israelis. These people are really dangerous. And, they're growing powerful. And now, we're like the next, and Turkey may look at it the same way. Again, we know Erdogan is dealing under the table with Israel, but at some point he might just start to realize, oh my goodness, maybe we're going to be next too. So you pursue this route of just conquest, of just purely military solutions. In the end, you end up making very powerful enemies, and a lot of people will just really, really hate you. And they can, maybe there's the country's in chaos for now, but eventually some forces were saying, some political group is able to reorganize them. And they're going to have a hatred for you that exceeded any hatred that existed in the past.
Well, what's the sentiment like in Israel? Do you know about this war with Iran? Are they in fear? Is there a lot of pressure internally? Because I would be. Because if you basically all of Israel will be a target, I think, in this war, right? All of their infrastructure, right. And we know that they can hit them. So are they not like? Is there a lot of pressure to be like, whoa, let's don't do this, or just like we said, like even if you did do it, won't this create more problems for you down the road?
There's just no sign of that pressure, They seem to really just trust the IDF, again, across the political spectrum. They just trust them, like if we got to have a war with Iran, we got to do it. And they trust that, that in the end they'll be victorious. Maybe some people will die. In the last war, 30 people were killed. That's not very many Israelis. We know that many, many more Iranians died. Of course, quite a few. That was, thanks to, you have to say, their air raid shelters. They managed to get people out of buildings before the buildings were struck.
I would say it's also the precision of Iran's missiles, and that they were targeting military structures where we see Israel just blow up buildings, with people inside it in the middle of the night to kill one scientist. They'll just destroy. All right, we killed 7 families. Great, Yeah, it's insane.
No, I know. Yeah, that's part of it too. Some of not all those missiles were so precise, but yeah, in part they were striking military facilities. So that's one thing that the Israelis themselves are not fully aware of, because there is very strict military censorship in Israel, and so there were no reports within Israel about that. Later it came out actually, but it was like in American media that, some of these bases were struck, and we don't know the extent of the damage, but, clearly those missiles had hit their targets, and military targets. And that's something that the Israelis themselves, the Israeli citizens by and large, are not fully aware of.
So do you think Israeli citizens by and large are for this war in Iran, even though they know they'll be in the crosshairs?
Just from a sampling of opinions, of the different pieces that I've read, I don't know that they're really for it. Like nobody's really pushing for it, but they accept it. They kind of they their feeling is that if it's if it happens, it has to happen. Our guys know what they're doing. Let's
Do you
put it
think
that
that
way.
it's more of a kind of a religious belief for them that like this is some divine battle for them, or that?
Well, certainly for some of them, there are religious Zionists there, and they're growing in power. That's no question about it. And they do have this kind of this messianic, apocalyptic view of things. These are the people like Ben Gvir is tied to this Third Temple movement. That's there, but a lot of them. But it's still not a majority of Israelis. I think the majority, is fair to say, is basically secular in their outlook. But they still have this faith in Zionism, which is, it may not be religious, but it's equally, powerful. It's still, it is something that it's an altar before which they worship, you could say, but in a figurative sense.
Yeah. Well, it's just insane to me to think that there isn't more of a pushback against this war within Israel. That they're the ones that will be destroyed from this, and just the United States. It's just amazing our mindset that even though Iran poses no threat to the United States, that it seems like this is going to happen, and there's that much momentum there. And I saw a couple clips. I want to show you. I'll show you two, but I'll start with one with Marco Rubio, and just so we can kind of see the mindset of the administration, how they view things here, like why we have to do this. Okay, so we'll start with this one.
On the issue of our presence in the region, here's the baseline I want to set for everybody. The baseline is this. We have 30 to 40,000 American troops stationed across 8 or 9 facilities in that region. All are within the reach. Not theoretically, in reality, all are within the reach of an array of thousands of Iranian one-way UAVs and Iranian short-term ballistic missiles, short-range ballistic missiles that threaten our troop presence. We have to have enough force and power in the region, just on a baseline, to defend against that possibility. That at some point, as a result of something, the Iranian regime decides to strike at our troop presence in the region. The president always reserves the preemptive defensive option. In essence, if we have indications that, in fact, they're going to attack our troops in the region, to defend our personnel in the region. We also have security agreements, the Defense of Israel Plan and others, that require us to have a force posture in the region to defend against that.
So I think it's just incredible that he admits that all of our bases are in range. All these people, all 30 to 40,000 Americans, they're all in danger. And instead, so you're actually like, yes, he recognizes it. So let's get him out of there, right? And said, no, we have to commit more there to protect them. Now we have to put more people in danger. And then he lets it slip at the very end that, well, we have this Israel defense thing. And then you realize this is why they're all here. All of these troops, and now we're sending more, and all this, they're all lambs to the slaughter for Israel. That's what this is. That's the way I read it. It's just so crazy that you can make that like, look, these people are in range of these short range missiles. Gotta, super. Well, let's send more people there.
Right. Yeah. No, it's absurd. Right. You create the problem, and then, you're right. That's just something that people have pointed out, or many have pointed out over the course of years, that these bases don't help the U.S. at all, but they're rather liabilities. And that's what he's admitting to. These are liabilities. We're exposed. Now we got to be out here with this tremendous force. Well, why did you need bases in Iraq? It makes no sense. One base was closed down recently, but I think we still have 2 very large bases in Iraq, and then many, and still have bases in Syria and many in the Persian Gulf states. It's absurd. This is, talking about just kind of a manufactured crisis. This is one that the Americans very much manufactured themselves, and now they declared that, well, because we've created this crisis, we put our people in harm's way, we may have to launch a war.
Right. And it's also just makes it very clear that, how the U.S. is an empire. We don't view we view these countries that we're in as our own property, that we can do whatever we want there. Right. Iraq doesn't want us there. No sovereignty. It's like we're not wanted there. We're there illegally in many of these countries. Yeah. And so our solution that these people that are in these bases illegally, that they're in danger, well, maybe we should do the right thing and take them out of harm's way. They're not there legally.
Yeah.
Instead, our idea is to just double down on this insanity.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the opposite of America first. Yeah. No
Well,
question about it.
let me show you one more video that I think show, because we talk about this so much. It's like, how can this happen? What is the administration thinking? There's no threat to the United States, that this will be devastating. We have real world evidence of the firepower that Iran possesses. And we know that China and Russia are aiding Iran. Iran is a country that's 3 times the size of Ukraine, has close to 100 million people. Like, this is insanity. And we have all this outdated tech, this huge armada that can be sunk by Iran. And that is something that we recognize. And just like, so why are we doing this? How can we possibly do it? And then I heard this Pete Hegseth next to Trump talking about, well, I'll just play it. And then for me, I'm like, okay, now I kind of understand the mind that Trump is inhabiting. The world.
Well, Mr. President, you had to, like so many other cabinet members have referenced, rebuild the perception of America. And at the Department of War, that meant reestablishing deterrence. What happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Ukraine, a war that never would have occurred, what happened on October 7th in Israel, never would have happened under President Trump. So as a result, we're having to rebuild how our enemies perceive us. And when President Trump said, we're not getting Iran, you won't have a nuclear bomb, he meant it. And we sent those B-2s halfway around the world, and they never noticed. When he said, we're not going to tolerate trafficking drugs anymore in our hemisphere, we treat them like the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere, he meant it, and we're executing that. When you said, Mr. President, we're securing the border, the military was proud to do their part alongside Homeland Security to do that. Same thing with Iran right now, ensuring that they have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department, just like we did this month. No other military in the world could have executed the most sophisticated, powerful raid, not just in American history, I would say in world history. What those men did, going downtown, another country, the most secure place, in the most secure base, in the middle of the night, without anybody knowing until those simultaneous bombs dropped 3 minutes before the helicopters dropped. No other country could coordinate that. No other president would have been willing to empower those warriors that way, to be that effective. And that sends a message to every capital around the world that when President Trump speaks, he means business, and we are reestablishing deterrence at the War Department, Mr. President.
Thank you. Great job you're doing.
This is what makes me think we're going to war.
Yeah. I think Pete Hegseth has job security. I think that's exactly what Trump wants to hear.
Well, yeah, that's the thing that I'm realizing, in that, why so much insanity is happening is because that the job of everyone around Trump is just to kiss his ass. You can see just like, oh, this never would have happened under Trump. Under Trump, just
under Biden.
Right. Well, he's saying that these wars would never happen under Trump. Ukraine, October 7th, at the beginning, but just constantly all this ass kissing, and then and just how this was the greatest thing in world history, this raid, and we talked about this as well. That I thought the most dangerous thing about this the raid in Venezuela when they kidnapped Maduro is what it did to Trump's ego, how it inflated it, and then the megalomania was full blown, because then right after that, ooh, let's take Greenland. Let's go to war with Iran. It's like, okay, he's heating up.
No, you're right. We've been talking about the fact that there are certainly people that may be pressuring him not to do this. Again, we're the Gulf state leaders, for example. There are probably people within the Pentagon and even within the State Department that are advising against it. But then we have, all these Pete Hegseths, who are just constantly flattering the emperor. That's what we've had this recent success. You have to say it was a success as far as it went, that the special operation in Venezuela. And so he has a sense of invulnerability. The danger is that he may be getting this pressure. He may be hearing this advice against going in, but he's now has this supreme confidence, a sense of invulnerability, and people like Pete Hegseth are sustaining that, and feeding that, rather than advising against it. So, yeah, we may be in real trouble.